Holy moly, this is pretty interesting. Hello, what is up guys? I'm your host Gordon and welcome to another one of my video. Today we got ourselves a pretty special looking blaster over here. This is a Webley and Scott shell ejecting, not too much of a shell ejecting, I'll tell you why later, a shell ejecting foam dart blaster by Wick. And yes, Wick is exactly the same company who make the model 1894 over here, which is a pretty sweet blaster. Since the 1894 is a pretty fun and sweet blaster, I am expecting a lot from this guy over here. Just like how I expect Mac Potato for sending me this blaster over here for today's review. Mac Potato is a local Malaysian online foam dart blaster seller who sells rare imported foam dart blaster as well as gel blaster. So if you guys are interested to get yourself one of these, the link is in the description down below, and they started their own website, so I provide the link in the description down below as well. In the box, we got the blaster itself, 6 shells, a bag of rubber adapters, and 20 darts. The blaster comes with these kind of shells, which is basically the same kind of shells that the Wick 1894 is using. But you will have to swap out the rubbers in order to use it with the 1894. Just grab something to pry off the existing rubbers and push in the new rubber adapter. In order to access the cylinder, press the cylinder release lever to access the cylinder. The blaster comes with these kind of darts, but in the test I will be using the suction cup darts for more stability. This is how you put the darts into the shells, and this is how you put the shells into the cylinder. The shell ejecting mechanism only works when the blaster is facing downwards. And press on the hammer to prime the blaster. Okay, first look at the blaster. Aesthetically, exactly this thing looks like a Webley and Scott Revolver, which is pretty sweet. So when you actually hold the blaster in hand, this thing feels extremely solid. That is what I'm expecting. The feeling of quality. The whole blaster is made out of a combination of nylon as well as metal parts. I mean, lots of metal parts. The trigger of the blaster over here is metal. The hammer over here, which is a functioning hammer, is metal. The cylinder release button over here, I'm not sure what I'm gonna call this, correct me if I'm wrong, is made out of metal. Even the tube that is holding the cylinder over here is made out of metal. I mean, speaking about the metal part, even the shell holder inside the cylinder is made out of metal. Speaking of overwhelming. Since there is a lot of metal on this blaster, so I'm expecting heavy weight. And yes, the weight of the blaster is satisfyingly heavy for a toy at least. Even though there is a lot of metal part on this blaster, sadly, the barrel is made out of nylon. There is no aluminum barrel in this blaster. The grip of the blaster is comfortable even though that I have big hands. And now let's talk about the shell ejecting mechanism that is not so much of a shell ejecting. Let me explain this. Unlike most of the revolver type foam dart blaster that I've reviewed in this channel, this actually uses shells. To be exact, this is exactly the same kind of shells that you use on the 1894. And yes, it is actually cross-compatible when you swap out the rubber piece on the shells. Yes, you hear me right, you actually need a rubber adapter to be used on this blaster. What do I mean by this blaster is not so much of a shell ejecting blaster, because when you actually, open up the cylinder like that, the shell did not eject out. In order for the shells to come out from the cylinder, you will have to pour out the shells just like so. Or you can swing the blaster downwards to eject the shells. Okay, one more thing that I actually found really addictive in this blaster is when you actually put the shells in the cylinder. Unlike the previous revolver type foam dart blaster, you just put in the darts in the cylinder and just call it a day and slap in the cylinder and start firing. This, you got the shells. I mean, you got that feeling of loading an actual revolver. I mean, this is a pretty interesting experience, and to be honest, this is really addictive. But one more thing that I kind of disappointed with this blaster is that when the blaster is loaded with shells, you can't really slap the cylinder shut, because when you do so, the shells will fly off. The only way to do the slapping action is when the cylinder is empty. And now I'm gonna pick up all those shells. Okay, one more interesting thing about this blaster is the priming. As I've mentioned before, this is an actual functioning hammer. What I mean is you actually prime the blaster with the hammer. Yeah. It is actually pretty cool when you prime the blaster and the cylinder rotates in the same time. I mean, that's cool. Another thing that I want to talk about the aesthetic of the blaster, there is actually a lot of Webley and Scott markings all over the blaster. I'm not sure if this is a licensed product. You will be the judge. Maybe yes, maybe no. I don't know. Overall, this is actually a pretty simple blaster with some realistic gimmicks on it, which is probably why this is so addictive. So yeah, I guess that's it for the blaster. Build quality is solid, everything is solid, so without further ado, enough of me talking, let us go test the blaster out. Okay, we are back. The performance of the blaster is expected for a collector piece is not the best. The blaster can only shoot from 38 FPS all the way to 49 FPS only. Yeah, definitely not the best performance, but the accuracy of the blaster is actually not too bad. So you might expect that this blaster can go for like a 4 meters to 5 meters. Wrong. I would say the optimum firing distance of this blaster is around 3 meters, but in 3 meters, the accuracy of this blaster is actually pretty good. But again, this is not a competitive blaster. This is basically one of those blasters for collectors. Or I would say that this blaster are for those who wanted something to display on the wall or on their desk. This is definitely one of those blasters that will hang on the wall, man. This looks pretty nice. I'm pretty sure that a lot of you guys will be asking me, what if I use the shells from the 1894 in this blaster without swapping out the rubber? The answer is, holy moly, you actually really need to swap out those adapter, those rubber, because it affects the FPS a lot. The performance is just pure bad. We are just getting like 8 FPS. Operating this blaster, so far I did not encounter any jams, which is a good thing. In fact, the operation of this blaster is actually very smooth. So it is pretty safe to say that the build quality of this blaster is actually pretty good from the inside out. So yep, that's all for today, guys. Like this video if you like it, dislike this video if you do not like it, subscribe if you haven't already, and of course I'm going to see you in the next video. Adios, guys!